Hey, what's up, students? I have a quick lesson I'd like to share with you on the idea of rhetorical strategies in mass communication. If you were in my class last year, and probably if you were in the other classes, you know a little bit about the idea of rhetoric. This was a big deal in the play Julius Caesar, in which characters are trying to persuade each other of certain things, and they're using certain techniques and devices to persuade the other characters in the play. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the way rhetorical strategies are used in media, particularly the strategies of metaphor, clustering, and narrative. Okay, so just a couple of quick ideas that I think inform this whole thing. They're kind of the underpinnings of rhetorical strategies and things we need to agree on before we kind of move forward. So first is just the point that in addition to media that entertains, and we've talked about this, there are also media that inform and persuade, right? So inform and persuade. However, second big point is that communicative acts and texts often blur the lines, making it hard for us to understand if a text is really informational or persuasive. Or maybe a text seems on the surface to be completely informational, but has elements of persuasion, and vice versa. So if we think about something like a political speech, we might tend to think of that as being something that's persuasive. However, imagine there's a political speech that's given directly following a total catastrophe, a natural disaster, a large-scale terrorist event, something like that. Well, isn't it principally to inform? Um, but where is the line, right? There's kind of a blurry line because probably at the heart of that, deep down, there's also a bit of persuasion going on. And I think the same thing is sort of true with news broadcasts, where these things seem to be informational, yet they're actually also about persuasion. And there might be certain biases that creep into news media and informational texts. So what we're talking about today really is the idea of media rhetoric. And this is the study of styles and strategies media products use to indicate or sometimes even hide their intentions, with the ultimate goal of keeping a bit of power over their audience. And that doesn't necessarily mean power for nefarious, evil purposes, but just, this is how media maintains control over its audience. So the first strategy is just the use of metaphor. We tend to think of metaphor as being something that's used in poetry or even in, fiction or drama. But metaphor is also used in persuasive and informational texts. And the metaphors we choose create a pretty big impression on an audience, and they help also to present ideas favorably. Those of you who have talked about lexical fields and brought that up in your IOCs last year, this is kind of the same kind of thing. Like, we continue to use metaphors and language related to one larger idea. Well, what is that saying? So, one basic example is the way sports metaphors are totally embedded into American English and probably English in the larger world too. So here are just some examples. We say this is all about politics. Hillary Clinton is the front runner, right? This was a game changer for the Supreme Court, and Obama's economic playbook is badly flawed. So what does that tell us, about the role maybe of sports in our culture, or how we view politics? There's a lot to be sort of gleaned from that. The second big strategy is the idea of clustering. So this is a bit more abstract, and it reminds me a little bit of the idea of a motif when we're talking about literature. But basically, a cluster is a grouping of distinct textual or graphic elements that together convey an idea more strongly than when taken in isolation. So we might have a few different symbols or ideas present in an image or in a text, and they're kind of reinforcing some larger idea. So let me give you an example. So what do you see here? What are the images and ideas that jump out at you and maybe stick together? How are individual words and images and colors all linked together? And how do these ideas sort of stick together to give an overall impression or message? So some of the things you might see are the water pouring forth in a very sort of violent stream from this dam. You also see this idea of scaffolding, actually kind of holding up the dam. And of course, there's this man a little left of center, but in the front ground or foreground, and he's quite strong. He's got like a muscly back. And there's also this dark, sort of steely filter over the whole thing. And I think what is going on here, and we have this "Is it in you" slogan in the lower right-hand corner with the product name Fierce. This is all about sort of strength and sort of steely strength. And I think these images, ideas, all work together. And if this were an unaltered image, I assume that the water wouldn't be pouring forth so aggressively, and the scaffolding might have been sort of photoshopped, and maybe we would see some trees on the mountainside and things like that. But the creator of this text has manipulated these things in order to cluster together a bunch of parts of this text to create a strong overall impression. The last rhetorical strategy I want to talk about today is the use of narrative. So we tend to think of narrative, which is essentially storytelling, as something that's used in fiction, be it in a book or a film or TV. But really, narrative and storytelling is an extremely persuasive and effective tool in all media. Human beings gravitate towards story to make sense of the world. Like if you just think of a picture that you see, there's always sort of an instinct to fill in the gaps, to try and understand what's happening, and essentially to create a story arc around that photo. So here is an advertisement. I've cropped it a little bit. It's for yogurt, and it's pretty obvious the way narrative is used here. In fact, there's a little bit of a story written on the side. Tired of living on a knife's edge, she reached for a spoon, right? And so the idea of storytelling, making sense out of what's going on in this product, is essentially used as a persuasive tool. So these three strategies, I'm going to click back, metaphor, clustering, and narrative, I want you to think about today and going forward in our unit. We're going to take a bit of a further look. So there you go.